Bonjour, Fred Maulson.
Bonjour.
We're together at La Coudray. We just did an hour-long documentary on treaty rights. You're head of enforcement for the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. Your father was a main shaker in the fight for sovereignty and treaty rights in the 80s and 90s, Tom Maulson. And you're here looking good. And we're talking about some of the blessings that treaty rights brought to the ceded territory. And you were saying, I guess in agreement with George Meyer, who was head of the DNR back then, that the walleye in the ceded territory are some of the best managed, cared for fish in North America. What do you think about that?
Well, I think he made some real strong comments, but back in the 80s, you know, the state at that time had no clue what was in these lakes. They didn't have the surveys. They didn't focus on the North Woods as what it is now. With treaty rights and spearing going on now, it's very intense. The state has a good judgment of what's in the lakes because of treaty rights and because of the members spearing each spring. Our fish are creeled each night, measured, sized, and then monitored back at the Odana office where Glyphwick is his home base is, and then turned around that afternoon for the next night of spearing, and that goes on year after year, and nothing really hasn't changed other than, you know, maybe some technology that today's society is putting upon us to better our efforts to monitoring our system.
Fred, some of the stuff we've talked about, the importance of hunting and fishing culture to both Indian and non-Indian alike in the ceded territory. My sons grew up in a tent camp. They raced with me. They made sugar. They went with me fish and line fishing. I know that you harvested from a young lad on. I know how important harvesting is in Indian country. What is important about the hunting and fishing culture in northwestern Wisconsin, and how can we preserve it?
Well, I think it comes back way back before even my time, my grandmother's time, back when it was all about subsistence. Families were a nomad. They only gathered when it needed to be to survive, maybe winter times, and they looked at the resource as a treaty upon the resource. They only took what they needed, and now comes a time when they looked at our society today, and we were the seventh generation for them, and they preserved it, and they looked at it that way. And now we are trying to do the same thing as an agency of the tribes to preserve it for the next generation and the seventh generation to come along. To my own personal experience, I think treaty rights and the fish and game and the gathering is very important. I have 4 young kids, great kids. My wife is a non-member. My kids are Mole Lake and the Sakagan Chippewas, which what they want to be called now, and they want to learn what I learned. I was growing up as a member from Flambeau, Lac de Flambeau. My dad was a very avid hunter, fisherman, trapper. That's how we provided for our family in the winter. It was trapping. Then spring came and we went out spearing, and that was our food for the summer. Then, you know, round robin again with his entrepreneurship is that he had businesses that he had in the summer that provided us, but he also came back that he was a Native American, and when treaty rights came along, I think he really saw himself to preserve these rights for everybody until today. He was a very avid person that provided and spoke up, and really took some hard battles back then on spearing and the protests. And you know, today he's still doing it in his own way. You know, treaty rights are first. There is no one tribe. It's all tribes, all treaty rights, all Anishinaabe people out there. Not even all from Wisconsin or Minnesota or Michigan. It's everybody that has that right with these signatory rights.
Back in the early 90s, when your dad, Tom Maulson, first got on council, we gave him tobacco, and he brought his pipe out to the Lynn mining site in Oneida County, and he stood there with us. We made fire with 2 sticks and had some deer meat and some rice and went around the circle and everybody talked. And then a couple months later, that company got out of town because they didn't want to fight us anymore.
That's my dad. I mean, he's always been there for everybody, for Native people that is going to detriment the resource. The resource is who we are. We live there. We live on it. With today's society, we use what we have now. If it's modernizing ourselves to preserve a right that we have, so be it. Everybody else is modernized. Why should we stay back in the 1800s using a canoe when we can use a boat and motor just like everybody else? So I mean, it's still alive, but in a way that is still traditional. We have, as a law enforcement officer, we provide that service and bring those elders in when we do our outreach to the communities and have those elders speak on behalf of how it was so difficult back then to provide for their families and have that right to do that and bring that to these youngsters that don't have that now. It's there for them now, but to learn that and hear that from elders, it's really powerful stuff that people have to hear.
This is Nick Vanderpine, Fred Maulson for LCO TV on the Coudray Reserve in northwestern Wisconsin. Miigwech.
Miigwech.